the #1 health podcast in the world, thanks to each and every single one of you that come back every week to listen, learn, and grow. Now, I am so grateful for this amazing community that we have, for each and every one of you that lend me your ears twice a week. And as you know, I'm always thinking about new ways in which we can serve and support our community and your journeys towards a better understanding of yourself and a better understanding of your friends, your family members, and the people around you and the world around us as well. Now, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. And today I'm joined with Jesus Joe, licensed marriage and family therapist and head of clinical operations at BetterHelp. And in this new monthly series, we will be serving real listeners of the show and community. You'll hear the stories, the things that they struggle with, and get to sit in on a real therapy session with the intention of letting you know you're not alone. We're all dealing with something. And in every show, we will address different themes, different experiences. And our goal is to bring more awareness to taking care of your mental health and provide everyone the tools, resources, and encouragement they need to heal their past for a brighter future. Now, when we were thinking about this idea, one of the things I realized is that today we hear a lot about therapy. People say, oh, my therapist said this to me, or I learned this in therapy. But rarely have we actually sat in on a therapy session. We don't know what it looks like. And often our family members don't know what it looks like. I'm hoping that this is going to be a resource that you can share with your friends, your family, so that they can understand therapy better, so that you can understand therapy better. And as a community, we can heal together as well. Today, Jesus and I are joined by a very wonderful and special individual named Ashley. And Ashley's joined us today to share her journey, to share her story. And I want you to welcome her and give her the deepest, warmest, most beautiful welcome from our On Purpose community, because she so kindly agreed to be a part of this today. So Jesus and Ashley, so grateful to have you here. I'm really thankful to do this with both of you. And this is the first time we're doing this. It's historic and it's special, but thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for including both of us. Yeah,
it's exciting.
It is exciting. And you know, we were talking a bit beforehand, and we really want to honor you, Ashley, and make sure that we serve you in an effective way. And so I'm going to now hand over to Jesus, who's going to start this wonderful conversation and discussion. So, Jesus, over to you.
I mean, just continuing a little bit of something Jay was mentioning, I want to make sure that you feel safe, that you feel comfortable. So if there's ever a moment that the conversation is going somewhere that doesn't feel right for you, you can indicate that in whatever way that you need to. But thank you. Thank you so much for being willing and open to talk about yourself for so many people, because I think part of destigmatizing the idea of seeking support is seeing other people do that, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing other real people doing that versus just hearing commercial after ad about doing this or trying this new thing. So my understanding is that you've already been in therapy for some time, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what initially got you to try it the first time.
So initially, I was so against therapy. I didn't want nothing to do with it. Like, I thought it was a lost cause. I was like, no one can help me. Like, no one can imagine what I'm going through or even trying to tell me what I can do to get better, because in my mind, nothing could help me. 2018, I believe, I overdosed on like sleeping meds. And after that, I was kind of actually forced into it. Like, I didn't have a choice. And that kind of started my therapy journey. And from there, I was in therapy for 2 years.
Something going on in your life led to some unsafe behaviors, like ways to cope. Like, people often turn to substance when there is trauma because it helps numb stuff. It helps you not think about things. And sometimes you feel good, right? It makes you feel not just better from this thing that has been painful, but it feels good. And so I'm hearing that you had kind of like a mandated route into therapy. You mentioned that you wouldn't have considered it. So what were some of your ideas about what therapy was before?
I didn't even know where to even begin, what therapy looks like. I just thought someone would just sit there and tell me, oh, how do you feel about that? Oh, how do you feel about that? You know what I mean? That's kind of like what I thought, or like someone tried to preach to me or like tell me what to do or how I should do it. But really, it wasn't like that at all for me.
It ended up being something different.
Exactly.
And I know you can't like give an entire synopsis of the therapeutic journey that you've been through, but now that you have gone through some of these sessions, and it sounds like you found out it wasn't just, so how did that make you feel? And I'm sure your therapist did ask many times, well, how did that make you feel? What do you think of therapy now then? What is therapy if somebody is to ask you, a seasoned client, like what to expect if they were to try this out?
Therapy is amazing. Honestly, I recommend it to everybody. They tell me the problems, like, you know what you need? A therapist. And like, I don't even mean that in like a negative, it's not a negative thing at all. It's very positive. And I try to enlighten that. But for me, when I was in therapy, like, okay, so you have these dark thoughts. And when you don't recognize them or you don't even know what they are, it can easily spiral out of control. And so with therapy, she really helps me recognize these thinking traps, is what we would call them. And throughout the day, I was more aware, like if I would say, I'm worthless, or you can't do that, I would be like, wait a minute, like that's not true. Like let's kind of lay it out and understand like what this is, or like where it's coming from. That's something I still practice until this day, every single day. Catch myself thinking something negative. And obviously there's more to it, but something I really took away from that.
Yeah, you're describing cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, you went through this process where somebody helped you learn to identify and then articulate your internal process. Because when you can start talking about it or even understanding it a little bit better, I think that's when you really are able to make strides in terms of finding healing for yourself, the ability to let the things go that you need to, the ability to move on. So you shared a little bit about what led to your first session, right? You were forced because you became unsafe to yourself.
Exactly.
Can you share now what you think led to the types of feelings you were trying to numb with substances?
Well, I think it was just like a let up. There wasn't like a particular event. Well, something did trigger it, and I can talk about that. But just overall, like I've been struggling with it since I was a young child. And I think it was like really just like a matter of time. And I think if I like received help sooner, it wouldn't have gotten to that point. And for like a lot of people like me, unfortunately, something that drastic has to happen for us to even want to accept help.
Yeah. The rock bottom experience, right? Like people, not people, I should say we often feel like there's some kind of like shortcoming or something wrong with me if I need to reach out for support. Because a lot of us have this misconception that therapy is for the weak-minded, the people that are absent of some kind of strong will of their own. And it takes a lot of courage, I think, to finally realize like vulnerability takes a lot of strength. Being able to open up to someone, being able to open up to yourself and admit a lot of stuff. Part. Yeah. And so you mentioned like your life led to that moment, I'm sure, series of events. And then you also said something about something did trigger this. So is that something that you're willing to kind of open up about now?
I think at that time, my depression really had a hold of me. Every single morning, the first thing I would do is cry, just because being awake was that difficult. I didn't even want to spend the day with myself, like, mentally. That was going on for a couple months, and I feel like no matter what I did, like one day I would wake up, I feel like I would do a good job, but I feel like it was still not enough. I'm like, wow, I really gave it my all, and it still was not enough. I was like, what is the point of being here? One day, my ex-boyfriend and I got in an argument, and I was like, wow, I'll never be enough. I'll never be worthy. And normally in those situations, I will contemplate. I'll have a conversation with myself. Like, okay, Ashley, one more day, like just hold on. But that day, there was no conversation with myself. A switch just flipped, and I just went through with it. And I was like, worst case scenario, I go to sleep and I wake up like, okay, but like best case scenario for me, I go to sleep and I don't even know what happened. That's what I was hoping for, but it didn't exactly go as planned, which is probably the best. I feel like a ticking time bomb. It was just a matter of when, really.
And you're describing just like living for such a long time without knowing how to regulate your emotions and really process a lot of stuff, right? And it like blew up in an argument, sounds like. I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of ask a little bit more about your previous therapy experiences so far. So while you've been in therapy, I'm hearing you say that you've learned some skills, you've learned some things to like cope with and navigate everyday life. Like, how did you learn that stuff? Like, what is it that the therapist was doing to teach these things, right?
So I'm a huge imagery person. And like one thing we would do, it was kind of like how I describe it, like a court case. Okay. Like you have your like the jury, you have like the lawyers, stuff like that. One thing I struggled with was feeling like I'm not capable of taking care of myself. Like I'm a grown adult. I should be able to take care of myself. And I couldn't. And so we would break down the evidence. Like, okay, what's real and like what's false? Like, let's just recognize that there. Because when you're this kind of mindset, you tell yourself so many lies, stuff that's not even true. And so I'm like, okay, well, I do this. I do my laundry sometimes. Like I have been working out past couple weeks. Like, oh, you do feed yourself. You have to give yourself credit for the things that you actually do. And we would write it down in the evidence section. And we would write down like what was false. And basically like the jury would come to the conclusion like, no, you are capable. So yeah, you would just really just have to, in that process, give yourself credit and kind of look at what was real and what wasn't. And you would shift those thoughts of, I should be able to. And you change it into, no, you are able to, and you do.
It's a lot of just shifting the way you think about stuff, taking on different perspectives, hearing someone kind of reword or like paraphrase your life in a different way. It sounds like you've learned a lot about yourself too. There's like a period of time where it sounds like you didn't really know who you were.
Mm-hmm.
Like what parts of learning these skills, learning how to identify evidence for and against some kind of thought or belief helped you figure out who you are? Like, do you feel like there was some kind of self-exploration, self-identification type of process? Like, it's not just learning skills, right? It's, I guess I'm trying to get to your sense of any kind of change in the ways that you perceive yourself. Like, how has that kind of shifted in that 2-year period?
So a lot of people, I believe, feel like they go to therapy and overnight they're so much better. And that's just not the case. And for me, again, till this day, it's something I had to practice every single day. So there wasn't like one particular moment where I just like saw myself in like a better light. Eventually, you keep practicing and practicing and practicing. And eventually, you start to learn yourself. You start to value yourself and you see yourself in a whole different light. You learn boundaries and you have them now. And you have rules for yourself. And you don't allow certain people or certain situations control you as much because you have more confidence in the tools and the coping mechanisms that you have developed throughout therapy. And that's definitely helped me a lot. And like to this day, I really do see myself in a higher light. And I don't let people take advantage of me as much as I used to back in the day.
Back in the day, people took advantage of you. In what ways do you think that was happening that you're able to prevent now?
Well, just one example you were mentioning earlier, people, they kind of self-sabotage, whether it's drugs, alcohol. For me, I didn't do any of that. For me, my reckless behavior was being promiscuous. And that's kind of like what I learned growing up was giving yourself in return for love. So that's what I thought I had to do in order to receive any sort of love. And so I would give myself to guys, and like thinking, oh, this is how they're going to accept me. This is like where they're going to love me. This is where I'm valued. And now it's not like that at all. I'm just like, no, I have so much more to give than my body. You know what I mean? And so that's just one example of how things have definitely shifted for me.
You're speaking of something huge here, right? Is like we as people, we learn how to not only give love, but how to receive love from very significant people really early in our lives, childhood. And those people that are supposed to love us unconditionally, keep us safe, nurture us, show us that the world is a safe place have a lot of power over us as young children. And so what I'm hearing is when you were a young child, some kind of event or series of events taught you that love means something, specific, right? So I'm curious, in your therapy experience, how much did you go back and talk about your childhood in that time?
When I went to therapy, we did go, well, you kind of have to understand why you feel this way. And it does stem from your childhood, everything. So we really did start from there, and we broke it down from there. It really does help. You start to realize how you're acting in the present it stems from that.
We reenact, we try to correct what happened to us as kids in our adult relationships. And I think we all try to the best of our ability, but to try to correct something that happened to us when we were 6. We didn't know any better,
Yes.
Trying to make this 6-year-old, be smarter. You should have known better, which we tell ourselves all the time. It sounds like you learned to have compassion for the small child inside of you.
Yes, 100%. Like, even to this day, like, I'm 27 years old, and to this day, I still feel like that little girl. Like, I feel like it's my duty to protect myself and be that person little Ashley needed when she was younger. You really do feel like it's your fault, like, or you should have done this differently or should have done that. You blame yourself and you're ashamed of it, but really it's not in your control, and the people in your lives should have been the ones protecting you.
Yeah, shame. Shame is a very powerful thing, right? It's like there's like a difference between when we feel guilty for doing something bad, we recognize that this thing, we probably could have made a different choice. But shame is like adding some really painful and uncomfortable stuff on top of that. I did this bad thing because I'm a bad person, or this bad thing happened to me and I deserved it because I'm a bad person. Like, in therapy, do you feel like you can remember some kind of shift in that sense of shame, like something that released you from feeling like all this stuff happened to me because I'm bad? What about this process? What about talking about yourself and your life helped you start to shift this idea away from being a bad person? Because I'm hearing you say that you are a good person. When did that change? Like, how does that change?
There's not one moment where it just shifts. It truly happens over time. And within my time of therapy, the 2 years, of course, relationships, jobs, real life situations are happening. And when I'm acting on them and I feel like, oh, this is happening to me, I deserve it anyways, I'm a piece of crap. You know what I mean? Like, and so you would accept that for yourself. But over time, you realize, like, wait a minute, like, I don't deserve that at all. It shouldn't be happening to me. You shouldn't accept that. And once you create those boundaries for yourself and practice it, it does get better.
A lot of people wonder, like, why do we go to therapy every week? What is it about this cadence of whatever? And it's like, why don't we go every day if I'm trying to solve this huge problem that's been part of my life for such a long time? And really, your life, your healing is what happens outside of therapy. It's just 1 hour a week. Most of the time, it's like you can't expect this 1 hour a week talking to someone on a couch or whatever to fix everything. It's talking about some stuff, learning some things, identifying feelings and behaviors that you could try to start working on in a different way. And it's in your real life outside of the session that this transformation is really happening. For some people, very gradually and over a long period of time. You mentioned you're 27. That's like, potentially 25 years of learning how to be in a particular space in a body. And it's going to take time to like unlearn, relearn, and start seeing the world in a way that is safe, right? So what would you say, like, if you had not gone to therapy, where would we be? Where would you be?
Oh my goodness. Like, if I never went to therapy, I would not be the person that I am today, nor be the person that I'm becoming. My self-awareness has grown so much, and I'm able to take care of myself more mentally. I'm able to value my thoughts more, or just like, again, if I'm negative, I recognize it real quick, and I try to change it into something more enlightening and more actually true. Go from false to true.
People come to therapy, and over time, after what's called the assessment period, where your therapist is getting to know you and asking you about your family history and like all your school stuff and everything you remember from your family, childhoods, whatever. once you move past this initial period where you're building this relationship, you start thinking about goals. What are the goals that I want to work on? And so you and your therapist like agree on these usually 2 or 3 major things that you want to achieve through this process. And usually you're looking for something called SMART goals. People talk about this all the time. You want to be specific, measurable. What's not always explicitly stated as a goal is increased self-awareness, but I think that's always going to be an outcome. At least I think most therapists are hoping that that's an outcome for their clients. So I'm really glad that you were able to even identify that that's something that's shifted for you, is self-awareness.
Yes, honestly, without my self-awareness, I think I would be so lost, because I do believe self-awareness is the first step. Like, you have to even recognize what you're doing or how you're behaving or what you're thinking about yourself. That's where it's starting, like from recognizing it. So if you don't recognize it, you really can't move forward or even try to get better. You were talking about the assessments, right? And so maybe like every 6 months we would review. And when I was feeling better, I'm doing better, we're reviewing from 6 months ago. And it was so sad. My heart was breaking for 6 months ago, Ashley. And she was saying, I'm referring to her as another, honestly, that's how I feel. It's like, I feel like a new person, like, honestly. But she was just referring to her like as self, like, unworthy, I'll never get better. It's just like, it was just very, very dark thoughts. And I was so sad for, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, that was me. Are you sure you're on the right assessment? And like, how I said these things. And yeah, it's true. It was just like, it was a transformation. And to reflect back on all of those and like how I was feeling, where I am today, it was a good feeling, because I wasn't feeling that way any longer.
Yeah. What you said is like exciting to me, because you're describing this very powerful component of not just therapy, but just like tracking your thoughts, tracking your moods, your behaviors. This is like why a lot of people choose to journal. They like to look back and see how far they've come. Like, if you never wrote down or put somewhere where you could remember where you were, it's very, very hard to identify how much better you've become, how much better you're feeling. So in therapy, it's a really like specific, intentional place to be able to have someone else doing that with you, tracking stuff, bringing your attention back to like, remember what you said last time? Because that doesn't really fit with what you're saying today. I'm hearing that you had a great therapist, really. It's like somebody that
great.
Yeah, is with you in this moment, but also taking you back to relevant moments in the past to make connections.
Mm-hmm.
This is what helps people gain better self-awareness, because self-aware people think about themselves in every chapter and season of their lives, try to relate the past to the present and how that's going to affect their future. And really, somebody that's not self-aware, it's going to be really hard for them to practice empathy, the ability to feel for another.
Mm-hmm.
So can you say anything about like your experience with empathy and whether you've noticed like a shift with that with your improved self-awareness?
Yeah. So I always considered myself an empathetic person, even before then. But there would be times where I'd feel like a robot, like almost incapable of feeling sorry for somebody. I feel bad because I'm like, I feel like I should feel something towards them, but I don't. And I really do. I think that helped me later on down the line to be more empathetic, 100%.
That's like a big life thing. It's like, I think we're all hardwired to connect, to want to be with other people, to have intimacy with folks that are important to us. And how can you do that if you don't even know who you are?
Yes, 100%. When you're really not sure of who you are, I mean, I don't know who I am. I'm still growing, but at that time, when you're just kind of like, I would describe myself as